Tuberculosis carries no toxin. It has no blade, no enzyme, nothing on it capable of cutting a single strand of tissue in a human lung. It divides once a day, slower than almost any bacterium that has ever made you sick, and it spends most of its life sitting completely still inside a cell that was supposed to kill it. Last year it killed 1.23 million people, more than any other infectious agent on the planet. So how does something with no weapons take a lung apart? The answer is not that we have missed a weapon. The answer is that it does not need one, because the damage is not being done by the bacterium at all. Start with what is actually there. Cut open the lung of someone who died of tuberculosis and you will find holes. Not damage, not scarring, not a lung that looks sick. Holes. Actual open cavities, usually near the top, with smooth walls, like something drilled them out and left. In people with lung TB, that kind of destruction shows up in 40 to 60% of cases, and it is what eventually kills them, because a lung with enough of itself missing can no longer move oxygen into your blood. So something in there did the drilling. Hold on to that, because the answer is not the one you would guess. Here is what put those holes there. When someone with active TB coughs, the droplets they release dry out in mid-air and shrink into particles somewhere between 1 and 5 microns across. Big droplets are useless to the bacteria. They get caught in your nose and throat and go nowhere. Only the shrunken ones ride the air deep enough to reach the alveoli, the little sacs at the very bottom of your lungs where the actual gas exchange happens. Those particles can hang in a room for hours after the person who coughed them has left. Each one carries about 1 to 3 bacteria. That is the dose. Not a mouthful, not a cloud, not some grim number in the millions. 1 to 3 cells. Among people in close, repeated contact with an infectious case, about a third become infected. For people who only cross paths with them, it drops to around 1 in 10. The gap between those two numbers is basically just time in the same air. Now, your lungs are not defenseless. They are patrolled by macrophages, immune cells whose entire job is to find things that do not belong and eat them. And they are good at it. A macrophage finds the bacterium within hours, wraps around it, and swallows it whole, which sounds like the end of the story. It is not. It is the part the bacterium was counting on. Once a macrophage swallows something, it seals it inside a little bag and then runs that bag through a process. The bag matures. It picks up new equipment at each stage, gets more hostile, and at the final step, it fuses with a compartment full of acid and digestive enzymes. That fusion is the kill. Everything before it is just preparation. Tuberculosis does not fight this process. It does not break the bag or punch its way out or neutralize the acid. It simply stops the bag from advancing to the last step. Think about an order sitting in a warehouse, packed and labeled and sitting on the dock, and someone has quietly pulled it out of the queue. Nothing looks wrong. There is no alarm because nothing failed. The package is exactly where it is supposed to be, going through exactly the steps it is supposed to go through, and it simply never gets to the last one. The bacterium releases a molecule that blocks the handoff between the early stage and the late stage, and the bag just sits there, arrested, permanently one step short of the acid. And a bag that never becomes a stomach is just a room, a warm, sheltered, nutrient-rich room, inside the cell that was supposed to be killing it. The macrophage has not been defeated. It has been converted into housing. This is the thing to understand about tuberculosis, and it will come back. It does not attack. It stalls. So it is safe inside a cell. That still leaves the problem of everything your body sends at it from outside. The wall around a TB bacterium is about 35 nanometers thick, several times heavier than the wall on a normal bacterium, and the outermost layer is made of mycolic acids, fatty molecules with chains of 60 to 90 carbon atoms packed side by side. The result is waxy and almost solid, not a membrane that flexes and lets things through, more like a coat of hardened grease. Most bacteria have a weakness here. Water-loving molecules get through greasy barriers poorly, and grease-loving molecules get through watery barriers poorly, so you attack whichever side is exposed. TB's wall blocks both. Add it up and things diffuse into a TB cell somewhere between 100 and 1,000 times slower than into the bacteria you are more used to. A drug that would reach its target inside an ordinary bacterium in an hour is still trying, days later, which is why TB drugs are measured in months, while most antibiotics are measured in days. And then there is the pace, which is where it stops looking like a weapon and starts looking like a strategy. Almost every bacterium that has ever made you sick works by outrunning you. It divides fast, doubles again, and tries to build an army before your immune system finishes figuring out what it is looking at. E. coli manages this in about 20 minutes. Tuberculosis takes 15 to 24 hours. One division. The protein that starts the process of splitting the cell in two assembles at least 20 times slower than the same protein in E. coli. By the standards of its own kingdom, this thing barely moves, which should be fatal. Any pathogen this sluggish should be found and cleaned out long before it amounts to anything. But that is only a problem if you're trying to win a race, and TB is not. It already lives inside the cell that was assigned to kill it. Nothing is chasing it. There is no reason to hurry. The slowness is also, quietly, a defense. Most antibiotics work by sabotaging a bacterium in the middle of dividing, which means a bacterium that divides once a day gives your drugs one opportunity a day to work. Your immune system spends weeks trying to kill something with a coat it cannot get through, that is barely growing, inside a cell it does not want to destroy. Eventually it gives up on killing, and it moves to Plan B. Plan B is containment. Your immune system gives up on killing and starts building, and what it builds is simultaneously the reason most infected people never get sick, and the reason the ones who do are so hard to treat. It starts packing cells around the infected macrophages in layers. Infected and dying macrophages at the center, a ring of more macrophages around that, then an outer cuff of T cells and B cells, sealing the whole thing off. The structure is called a granuloma, and it is roughly the size of a grain of rice. Containment is the right call. The alternative is an immune response spraying across the whole lung to chase bacteria it cannot catch, which would wreck far more tissue than the infection ever would. So the body picks a corner, puts the fire in it, and holds the line. Around a quarter of everyone alive is carrying this arrangement right now. Most of them will carry it to the grave without a symptom, and only somewhere between 5 and 10% will ever have it turn into disease. But the center of that structure dies. Cut off from good blood supply, the tissue in the middle breaks down into a soft, pale, crumbly material that pathologists have been comparing to cheese since the 1800s. Low oxygen, poor circulation, dense necrotic sludge that drugs cannot diffuse through properly and that binds some of them on contact. Nothing gets in there easily, not your immune cells, not oxygen, and later, not antibiotics. Your body built a sealed chamber, sterilized against outside interference, in a part of the lung nothing else can reach, and put the bacteria inside it. This is the part I said would come back. TB does not attack, it stalls. Stall long enough and the body will build you something. Now let us go back to those holes. Something drilled cavities into a human lung, and by this point in the story, you have been handed a fairly complete picture of the culprit. A bacterium that shuts down immune cells, wears armor, nothing penetrates, and lives in a chamber your own body built for it. Obviously that is the thing eating the lung. Except tuberculosis cannot eat a lung, it has no tool for it. Your lungs are not soft the way they look. They are held up by a structural mesh of collagen, the same protein family that makes tendon and cartilage, a fibrous scaffold that gives the tissue its shape and keeps the airways open. To carve a cavity through it, something has to cut that mesh. Nothing on the outside of a TB bacterium can do that. It has a coat, not a blade. The whole design is defensive. The enzymes that cut collagen in your lung are yours. They are called matrix metalloproteinases, and you produce them on purpose. Your body remodels its own tissue constantly, and to rebuild anything you first have to demolish it, so you keep a set of enzymes that cut structural protein. They are dangerous by design. So you also produce inhibitors that ride along and keep them switched off, unless there is a specific reason to switch them on. Cutting tools with the safety on. During a TB infection, the cutting keeps getting turned up, and the safeties do not keep pace. Monocytes, neutrophils, the lung's own tissue cells. All of them pour out enzymes built to sever collagen into a lung where the collagen is the only thing holding the shape. There is no counterweight. So the mesh gets cut and cut and cut. That is what makes the hole, not the bacterium. You, which means the last 10 minutes have to be read differently. Everything you were shown as a defensive trick, a bacterium hiding from your immune system, was actually the setup for this. It stalled inside the macrophage, so it never got cleared. It never got cleared, so your immune system could never stand down. And an immune response that never stands down keeps working. In 1 square inch of tissue, for months. TB does not need a weapon. It needs your immune system to stay angry in one place for a very long time, and everything it does, the stalling, the coat, the crawling division rate, is in service of exactly that. It is not surviving your defenses. It is keeping them switched on for as long as it takes. And when enough of the mesh is gone, the granuloma stops being sealed. The dead cheese-like core, packed with living bacteria, breaks through into an airway. It has to go somewhere, so it goes up. The patient coughs it out. What is left behind is an open cavity, connected directly to the bronchial tree, warm and full of oxygen, which happens to be the single best growing environment this bacterium has ever had access to. The bacteria in there multiply into numbers they could never reach inside a cell, and now every cough sends them out into the room. Look at what has actually been built. The bacterium provoked an immune response. The immune response cut a hole. The hole opened into the airway. The airway leads out of the body and into the next person's lungs. The exact process that destroys the patient is the process that spreads the disease. This is not a side effect, it is the mechanism. People with cavities are the main source of transmission, and they are also the ones whose infections are hardest to cure and most likely to develop resistance. Damage accumulates faster than lung tissue can be replaced, and lung tissue is barely replaced at all. Vessels running through the destroyed regions get eroded, which is where coughing up blood comes from. When enough of the organ is gone, oxygen stops making it into the blood in sufficient quantity, and that is the ending for most people who die of TB. Some of them die another way, because the bacteria reach the bloodstream and set up in the spine, the kidneys, the membranes around the brain. But the common ending is a person suffocating slowly inside a lung their own immune system took apart. So why does treating this take 4 months? You already have every piece of the answer. Antibiotics reach the bacteria by diffusing out of the blood, and the bacteria live in a structure with almost no blood supply, behind a rim of packed cells, inside a necrotic core that some drugs cannot penetrate and others stick to and stop moving in. Whatever gets through then has to cross that waxy wall into a cell that divides once a day in an environment so low in oxygen that many of the bacteria have shifted into a near-dormant state where most drugs have very little to attack. So treatment is several drugs at once for 4 to 6 months. And the fatal part is that people feel better long before it is over. Stop early and you have not cured anything. You have run a selection experiment. The bacteria most sensitive to the drug die first, and the ones left are the ones that were hardest to kill. Drug-resistant TB used to mean up to 20 months of treatment with drugs that made people miserable, and roughly half of patients came out the other side successfully. There is now a 6-month combination that gets that to nearly 9 in 10. That is a real achievement, and it is worth saying plainly, because most of this story does not go that way, because it is not a historical disease. In 2024, 10.7 million people got tuberculosis, and 1.23 million died of it, which is more than any other infectious disease on Earth managed. Not a legacy number, not a total from some earlier century. 1 year. In the United States, it never actually left. There were over 10,300 cases in 2024, the highest count since 2013, and 10,260 the following year, holding at about 3 per 100,000 people. Colorado went from 78 cases to 103 in a single year. The vaccine most of the world uses was developed in 1921 and does a decent job protecting small children from the worst forms while doing very little for adults, which is the group that spreads it. A newer candidate, currently in its final trial stage, is showing around 50% protection, and that number is considered a breakthrough, which tells you something about the last 100 years. We understand this organism in extraordinary detail. We can name the molecule it uses to stall the macrophage, count the carbon atoms in its coat, watch the enzymes cut the lung apart, and a bacterium that divides once a day carries no toxin and cannot cut a single strand of collagen on its own is still in 2024 the most lethal infectious agent we have. It never needed to be dangerous, it only needed to be patient and to let us do the rest.